The Betrayal's consequences. The orbital defense platforms surrounding Nexus Prime, once the pride of the Galactic Council's military might, loomed into silent explosions against the backdrop of space. Supreme Counselor Vrax watched in horror from the panoramic windows of the Council's emergency command center. His chitinous exoskeleton trembled slightly, mandibles clicking in agitation as another defense array disintegrated under human weapons fire. "How is this possible?" hissed Counselor Mira, her serpentine body coiled tightly in distress. Their fleet was supposed to be decimated in the Arcturus ambush. Vrax turned away from the window, his compound eyes reflecting the chaos of the command center. Dozens of species from across the galaxy, the administrative backbone of the Council that had governed interstellar civilization for 2,000 years, scrambled in panic. Warning klaxons blared as tactical displays showed human warships systematically dismantling the defenses of the Council's capital world. Apparently, Vrax said with surprising calm, "We underestimated them. Again." 7 months earlier, the Council had orchestrated what they believed would be the perfect solution to the human problem. Humanity had expanded too quickly, developed technology too rapidly, and shown a disturbing tendency to question the Council's authority. When the nomadic Krell swarm appeared at the edge of human space, the Council saw an opportunity. Instead of honoring their mutual defense pact with Earth, they secretly provided the Krell with access codes to human defense systems. The subsequent Krell invasion devastated 17 human colony worlds and killed over 90 million people in what became known as the Week of Darkness. The Council expected Earth to crumble, to become another subjugated civilization dependent on Council protection. They had calculated that humanity would need decades to recover, time enough for the Council to solidify its control. They were wrong. "Supreme Counselor, we've lost contact with the Garaxian and Threlb fleets," reported Admiral Zoll, his holographic form flickering above the command table. "The humans are using some form of quantum disruption technology we've never seen before. Our ships can't coordinate." Vrax's inner eyelids clicked shut momentarily. The Garaxian fleet alone represented nearly a third of the Council's military strength. "What of our allies?" asked Mira. Admiral Zoll's tentacled appendages gestured in agitation. "The Promethean Concordat has declared neutrality. The Hizak Dominion has closed their borders. The Aelari appear to be actively providing support to human forces." A shocked silence fell over the command center. The Aelari were among the oldest members of the Council, thought to be unwaveringly loyal. "They knew," whispered Counselor Thune, his gaseous form swirling in distress within his containment field. "The Aelari must have known what we planned against Earth and disagreed. They chose to side with humanity." "Tactical update," announced a Raxian technician, his crystalline structure pulsing with stress lights. "Human forces have breached the outer defense grid. They will reach planetary atmosphere in approximately 17 minutes. Vrax turned back to the window, watching as human battlecruisers executed a complex formation change that would have been considered impossible just years ago. Their hulls were sleek, functional, not adorned with the ceremonial ornamentation that Council vessels displayed as symbols of authority. These were warships built by a species that understood the true nature of conflict. "Counselor Vrax," came a voice from behind him. Vrax turned to see High Minister Kala, the diplomatic corps leader, her multifaceted eyes unreadable. "We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, bypassing our encryption." "Show me," Vrax ordered. The command center's main display flickered, and a human face appeared. She wore a simple dark uniform with minimal insignia. Admiral Maya Santos of the Earth Defense Force, according to the translation overlay. Her expression was composed, almost serene, which somehow made her presence all the more unsettling. "To the leadership of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice neither raised nor emotional. "For 2,000 years, you have positioned yourselves as the benevolent guardians of civilization among the stars. That lie ends today. Images began to play alongside her face. Recordings of council members planning the betrayal, communications with Krell leaders, the authorization codes being transferred. The council members watched in growing horror as their secret deliberations were exposed for all galactic civilization to witness. 7 months ago, you orchestrated the deaths of 93 million humans, Admiral Santos continued. You believed we would be too devastated to respond effectively. You believed we would turn to you for aid, become dependent on your protection, and ultimately accept a diminished position in your hierarchy. Her calm expression finally shifted, a flash of cold determination crossing her features. You fail to understand something fundamental about humanity. We do not break. We transform. The tactical display updated, showing human fleets emerging from faster-than-light travel across Council space. Not dozens of ships, but thousands. Impossible, whispered Admiral Zoll. Their shipyards were destroyed. Their production capacity was. Where are these vessels coming from? Demanded Vrax. It appears they converted their civilian manufacturing infrastructure to military production, replied a tactical analyst, a Sovrax with enhanced computational abilities. Furthermore, they seem to have improved upon our technology. These vessels show energy signatures 37% more efficient than our most advanced designs. Vrax felt a cold sensation travel down his spine. In mere months, humanity had not only recovered from a devastating attack, but had surpassed Council military technology that had been refined over centuries. After the week of darkness, Admiral Santos continued from the screen, Earth unified as never before. Our response is not vengeance, though many called for it. Our response is justice. The camera panned out, revealing that she stood in what appeared to be a courtroom rather than a military command center. We have documented every council member who voted for the betrayal, every official who implemented it, and every military commander who facilitated it. As of this moment, Earth has declared all involved to be war criminals. You will be brought to Earth to stand trial for the deaths of 93 million humans. Panic erupted in the command center. Several council members rushed toward the exits, while others shouted contradictory orders to the staff. Silence. Vrax's amplified voice cut through the chaos. He turned to Admiral Zoll's hologram. What are our options? Supreme Counselor, I recommend immediate evacuation of key leadership to the contingency facility on. The hologram flickered and died. A moment later, all external communications went silent. The tactical displays showed human forces had somehow disabled the planet's central communication network without firing a shot. They were inside our systems before they ever arrived, realized Kala, her diplomat's composure finally cracking. They've been planning this meticulously. Evacuation protocols now, ordered Vrax. All council members to secure transport immediately. As the command center emptied, Vrax found himself momentarily alone with Counselor Thune. The gaseous being's containment field hovered closer. We should have listened to the Elari, Thune said quietly. They warned us that humans were different, not just physiologically, but philosophically. They told us humanity would eventually challenge our authority not out of ambition, but out of principle. The Elari are idealists, Vrax replied, though his conviction had vanished. The Council has maintained peace for millennia. Sometimes harsh measures are necessary. And now we face the consequences. Thune's gaseous form swirled contemplatively. Have you considered, Vrax, that perhaps we deserve to be challenged? That our system had become corrupt? Before Vrax could respond, security forces arrived to escort them to the evacuation ships. As they hurried through the once grand corridors of the Council headquarters, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on ancient murals depicting the Council's formation, promises of unity, justice, and peace among the stars. Promises that, Vrax now realized, they had betrayed long before humanity entered the galactic stage. The evacuation hangar was chaos incarnate. Council members from dozens of species, beings who had controlled the destiny of 1,000 worlds, now scrambled desperately for space on the limited number of escape vessels. Guards struggled to maintain order as priority clearances were ignored in the panic. Vrax used his authority to secure passage on the Council's primary diplomatic vessel, the Eternal Concord. As the sleek ship rose from the hangar and accelerated toward the designated emergency jump point, he watched the capital's skyline recede. The magnificent spires and floating gardens that had stood for thousands of years now sat vulnerable beneath the human blockade. Supreme Counselor, the pilot called back, a Thean with 6 arms manipulating the controls with extraordinary precision. "We're receiving another broadcast from the human forces." "Ignore it," Vrax ordered. "Sir, they're saying they know our course. They claim to be waiting at every possible jump point." The ship's tactical display confirmed the pilot's words. Somehow, the humans had predicted not only their escape but the specific contingency protocols. They had positioned their forces accordingly. Admiral Santos's face appeared on the ship's communication screen without being accepted. "Supreme Counselor Vrax, this is Admiral Santos. Your vessel is surrounded. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Vrax stared at the human, seeing not the barbaric creature Council propaganda had portrayed, but a being of terrible clarity and purpose. "And if we refuse?" he asked. "Then you will have chosen your fate," she replied simply. "But know this, my orders are to capture, not kill. Even now, after everything you've done, we offer what you denied us, the protection of justice and law. The choice is yours." As human vessels closed in around the Eternal Concord, Vrax realized the true nature of the defeat they faced. It wasn't merely military or political. It was moral. Humanity had not only outfought them, but had maintained principles that the Council had abandoned generations ago. "Power down the engines," he ordered quietly. "We surrender." Judgment and revelation. The detention cell aboard the human battlecruiser Defiance was unlike anything Supreme Counselor Vrax had expected. Instead of the primitive barbaric conditions Council propaganda had claimed humans maintained, the chamber was clinically efficient and designed to accommodate his specific biological needs. The environmental controls were calibrated precisely for his species, and even the lighting had been adjusted to the spectrum most comfortable for his compound eyes. This attention to detail was somehow more unsettling than any mistreatment would have been. When the door slid open, Vrax expected to see guards. Instead, Admiral Maya Santos entered alone, carrying a data tablet. She sat across from him at the small table, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "Your colleagues have been quite cooperative," she said without preamble. "High Minister Kala has provided extensive documentation of the Council's deliberations leading up to the betrayal." Kala was always pragmatic. Vrax replied, his mandibles clicking softly. "May I ask what happens now?" "Now," Santos said, "you are transported to Earth, where you will stand trial before an international tribunal for crimes against humanity." Vrax's inner eyelids flickered in what humans might recognize as a blink. "You could have simply destroyed us. Your forces clearly have the capability. Why this process?" Santos studied him for a moment. "Because that's the difference between us, Counselor. You saw a problem and chose extermination. We see criminals and choose justice." She activated the tablet, displaying a holographic star map. "Your attack killed millions, but did not break us. Instead, it united Earth as nothing in our history ever has." The display showed Earth's defensive posture before and after the Krell attack, not just a military reorganization, but a fundamental societal shift. Resources redirected, industries transformed, scientific advancement accelerated beyond what should have been possible. "Fascinating," Vrax said quietly. "Your species turned grief into progress." "We turned betrayal into resolve," Santos corrected. "After the attack, every nation, every corporation, every research institution on Earth focused on a single purpose, ensuring such a tragedy could never happen again." "And your vengeance?" Santos shook her head. "This isn't vengeance, Counselor. If it were, Nexus Prime would already be a radioactive wasteland. This is accountability. The door opened again, and a human in civilian clothing entered. Professor Chen, Santos acknowledged. Thank you for coming. Admiral. The newcomer nodded, then turned to Vrax. Supreme Counselor, I'm Dr. Elena Chen, xenanthropologist. Before the attack, I spent 15 years studying Council civilization. I remember your work, Vrax said, surprising both humans. Your analysis of Council governance structures was uncomfortably perceptive. Chen smiled briefly. I'm here because Admiral Santos thought you might want to understand why this happened, not just how we defeated you, but why the Council felt threatened enough by humanity to attempt genocide in the first place. Vrax considered for a moment, then gestured with a claw in affirmation. I would like to understand. Chen sat beside Santos. The Galactic Council has existed for nearly 2,000 years, evolving from a mutual defense pact into a governing body. But that evolution carried a fundamental flaw. The Council never developed a mechanism to meaningfully reform itself. She activated a display showing the Council's organizational structure, highlighting how power had concentrated among the founding species over millennia. Your civilization stagnated, Counselor. Not technologically. You continued to advance, albeit slowly, but philosophically. The Council became increasingly focused on maintaining stability rather than promoting progress. Stability prevents conflict, Vrax countered. The Council maintained peace across 1,000 worlds for centuries. Peace isn't merely the absence of conflict, Chen replied. True peace requires justice, equity, and the freedom to evolve. Your peace was enforced through cultural dominance and technological monopoly. Santos leaned forward. Then humanity arrived on the galactic stage. Yes, Chen continued. And we were problematic. Humans adapt rapidly, both biologically and culturally. We embrace change. We question authority. We innovate at rates that alarmed Council analysts. But most threatening of all, Santos added, we rejected the fundamental premise of the Council, that stability must come at the cost of freedom. Vrax's compound eyes fixed on the human admiral. You were dangerous. Your expansion was unprecedented. Your military technology was advancing exponentially. Multiple predictive models showed human dominance within a century if left unchecked. We never sought dominance, Santos said quietly. We sought partnership, a partnership that would have changed us, Vrax replied. Your ideas were infectious. Species that had accepted Council authority for generations began questioning our decisions after contact with humans. The Aelari, who had been loyal members for over 1,000 years, began advocating for Council reforms based on human governmental models. Understanding dawned on Chen's face. You didn't fear our military. You feared our ideas. Both, Vrax admitted. But yes, your ideology was the greater threat. The Council exists to maintain the established order. Humanity championed constant change. The two cannot coexist. Santos shook her head. That's where you're wrong, Counselor. Change and stability aren't opposing forces. They're complementary when properly balanced. The ship's intercom activated. Admiral, we're approaching Earth. The tribunal representatives request your presence for the arrival briefing. Santos stood. You'll remain here until transfer to the surface. Professor Chen will continue to answer any questions you may have. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, Counselor, I believe you genuinely thought you were protecting galactic civilization. The tragedy is that you couldn't see how badly that civilization needed to change. After she left, silence stretched between Vrax and the xenanthropologist. What happens to the Council now? Vrax finally asked. Chen's expression softened slightly. That's not entirely up to us. Many Council worlds have already declared independence or formed new alliances. Others are requesting Earth's protection or assistance. The Aelari have proposed a new form of galactic governance, a true federation rather than the hierarchical structure the Council maintained. and those of us who orchestrated the attack. You'll be tried fairly, Chen assured him. Those found guilty will face consequences, but not execution. We believe in rehabilitation where possible, containment where necessary. Vrax's mandibles clicked in what might have been bitter amusement. How very human. Yes, Chen agreed simply. It is. The International Court of Justice in The Hague had been expanded significantly to accommodate the unique needs of the various council species standing trial. Vrax observed the proceedings with a detachment that surprised even him, watching as, one by one, his colleagues were judged for their roles in what humans now call the Arcturus genocide. Some denied responsibility. Others claimed they had been missiled. A few, like Kala, acknowledged their guilt and provided evidence against others in exchange for leniency. The trials stretched over months, broadcast across both Earth and former Council space. Vrax's own trial was the last. By then, the evidence was overwhelming. Communications records, policy documents, security footage of closed Council sessions where the plan had been formulated and approved. His defense was not to deny his actions, but to contextualize them. I acted to preserve the galactic order that had maintained peace for millennia, he testified. I believe humanity represented an existential threat to that order. And now? Asked the Chief Justice, a stern human woman with silver hair. Vrax's compound eyes surveyed the courtroom. Now I understand that the order I sought to preserve had already failed. It had become a system for maintaining power rather than promoting prosperity. Perhaps it needed to fall. The sentence, when it came, was neither harsh nor lenient by human standards. Life imprisonment with the possibility of review after 50 years. For a species with Vrax's lifespan, it meant he would likely see freedom again, albeit as an old being. As he was led from the courtroom, a familiar figure waited in the antechamber. Admiral Santos, now wearing civilian clothing. Admiral, Vrax acknowledged. Or is it just Santos now? Director, she corrected. I've been appointed to oversee the new Galactic Cooperation Initiative, replacing the Council with a human authority. Vrax's tone was more curious than accusatory. Santos shook her head. Not a replacement, and certainly not a human authority. The initiative is a transitional body with representatives from all former Council worlds and independent systems. Its purpose is to facilitate the creation of a new form of galactic governance, one built on mutual respect rather than hierarchical control. And you believe this will succeed where the Council failed? I believe it has a better chance, Santos replied. The Council began with noble intentions too, but lost its way over time. We've studied your history carefully to avoid repeating your mistakes. Vrax considered this. The fundamental problem remains, Director Santos. Civilizations evolve at different rates. They hold different values. How do you create a governance structure that accommodates such diversity without imposing cultural hegemony? Santos smiled slightly. That's exactly the question the initiative was created to explore. And the fact that you're asking it suggests you might have valuable insights to contribute. Vrax's mandibles clicked in surprise. You're not suggesting. Your sentence includes an option for productive contribution, Santos confirmed. If you choose, you can work with the initiative's research division, analyzing the Council's historical governance failures and helping design systems to prevent similar outcomes. You would trust me with such responsibility. After what I've done. Trust is earned, Santos replied evenly. But understanding is valuable, and you understand the Council's flaws better than most. You've seen firsthand what happens when a governing body fears change more than it values growth. A guard approached, indicating it was time to transport Vrax to the secure facility where he would serve his sentence. Consider the offer, Santos said as he was led away. After all, if humanity has proven anything, it's that transformation is possible, even after devastating loss. 5 years later, from his restricted but comfortable quarters in the Alpine Reconciliation Center, Vrax watched the inauguration ceremony of the new Galactic Federation. Unlike the Council's grand ornate assemblies, This gathering was deliberately modest, representatives from over 300 worlds meeting in a simple, functional chamber designed for collaboration rather than ceremony. The Federation Charter, which had taken 4 years of intensive negotiation to complete, established a system fundamentally different from the Council's structure. Power was distributed rather than concentrated. Decision-making was transparent rather than secretive. Most importantly, the Charter included robust mechanisms for ongoing reform and evolution. As he watched the ceremony, Vrax thought about the report he had submitted to the initiative last month, an analysis of why the Council had felt so threatened by humanity that genocide seemed a rational response. The report had been uncomfortable to write, requiring him to confront centuries of Council dogma and his own deeply held beliefs. His door chimed, and Director Santos entered, carrying a data tablet. "I read your report," she said without preamble. "It's being distributed to the Federation's governing council as recommended reading." Vrax's mandibles clicked in surprise. "I was candid about the council's failings. And my own. That's precisely why it's valuable," Santos replied. "You've provided insight into how governance systems can become so focused on self-preservation that they lose sight of their purpose." She handed him the tablet, displaying a live feed of the Federation ceremony. The current speaker was an Alari delegate, one of the Council species that had secretly aided humanity. "We stand at the beginning of a new era," the Alari was saying. "Not one dominated by any single species or ideology, but one where diversity is recognized as strength rather than threat. The Council fell because it feared change. The Federation embraces it." Vrax watched thoughtfully. She may be optimistic. The challenges remain substantial. "Of course," Santos agreed. "No system is perfect, especially at its inception. The difference is that the Federation is designed to evolve, to learn from mistakes, to adapt to new circumstances, like humanity itself. And if it fails?" Vrax asked quietly. Santos considered the question seriously. "Then we'll learn from that failure and build something better. That's the other lesson humanity brought to galactic civilization. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise afterward." As the ceremony concluded with representatives from hundreds of worlds signing the Charter, Vrax reflected on the irony of his position. He had orchestrated the near destruction of humanity to preserve the Council's authority, only to become witness to, and in some small way, contributor to, the birth of a new and potentially better system from the ashes of that conflict. "There's a human concept I've been studying," he said finally. "The idea that creation often requires destruction. That new growth emerges most vigorously from burned ground." Santos nodded. "We call that phoenix renewal. It's an ancient metaphor." "Perhaps," Vrax suggested, his compound eyes reflecting the images of unity and cooperation on the screen. "That is what the galaxy needed. A forest fire to clear away the dead wood and allow new life to flourish." "A painful process," Santos observed. "Yes," Vrax agreed solemnly. "Made more so by the fact that we brought it upon ourselves through fear rather than wisdom." He turned his gaze from the screen to the human. "I cannot undo the harm I caused. 93 million lives remain on my conscience, but perhaps in some small way, my experience can help ensure such a tragedy never occurs again." Santos studied him for a moment. "That's all any of us can do, Counselor. Learn from the past. Work for a better future." She gestured to the ceremony concluding on the screen, and recognized that sometimes what we fear most isn't destruction, but transformation. As she left, Vrax turned back to the window, gazing at the snow-capped mountains beyond the facility. Earth was nothing like he had imagined, not the barbaric, chaotic world Council propaganda had portrayed, but a planet of extraordinary diversity and resilience. The humans had been right. The Council's greatest mistake hadn't been underestimating humanity's military capacity or technological innovation. It had been failing to understand that true strength comes not from resisting change, but from embracing it, from transforming crisis into opportunity, conflict into cooperation, and even enemies into allies. The galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps, Vrax reflected as he watched a new dawn breaking over Earth's mountains, that was exactly what it needed.